Okay, I have to stop for a second because this is episode 50, and I cannot just let that go by like it's just a normal Thursday, a year-old Thursday. 1 year, 50 episodes, nearly 20,000 downloads. By the end of this month, there will be 20,000 downloads, almost 60,000 views on YouTube. Did you know there's a YouTube channel? And I have something to tell you today that I have been sitting on for a while. And if you follow me, I was going to share this. So stay with me because this one is different. Hey there, friend. Welcome back to Rip It Off, where we rip off the lies purity culture taught you about sex and rebuild biblical intimacy in your marriage. Yes, and amen, without shame. If you're new here, I am so glad you found this place. And if you've been around a while, you already know we don't tiptoe around the hard stuff. So let's get into this. Episode 50. I genuinely did not know if I would make it to 50 episodes when I started this. Actually, when I started it, I was like, I am all in. Let's do this. And then, if you remember, we took a little pause. And I was like, oh, okay. So maybe the Lord is asking me to lay it down. So I did. And then I was just like, no, I feel like this is what I need to be doing. And so here we are. I remember recording the first one thinking, not necessarily who is going to listen to this, but man, who's that one woman? Because I know that there is a need for this, but it's a little scary. Is this really going to reach her? Is this okay? Am I going to get in trouble? Now, I'll be honest, that wasn't a forethought, at the forefront of my mind, but definitely this is out there. One of my favorite questions when people ask is how'd you get started talking about this? I was like, oh, well, I grew up as a little girl saying I wanted to talk publicly about sex. No, absolutely not. But I know that this is where the Lord has me. And I remember I had the opportunity to interview someone that I admire on a past podcast that is no longer live. And she said something along the lines of, you know what, sometimes you have to be the one who starts saying the hard things. And that hit me. And I was like, oh my gosh, maybe, sorry if you're watching, that was a little bouncy there. Maybe that's me. Maybe this is what I have been called to do. The messages have come in little by little and from women and men who have been carrying something in silence for years. And sometimes you're like me, you were carrying it for decades and you finally feel like you have language for it. I think I shared an email that I had gotten recently where a listener was saying, I actually had a conversation with girlfriends about this and we had never talked about sex before. It made me and my husband tear up, just this idea that women are talking. It means so much because I remember being there. Wives who love God and love their husbands and have been so confused about why this part of their marriage has felt so hard. That's who I'm talking to. Women who said, I played this episode for my husband and we finally had the conversation we'd been avoiding for years. That is why I'm here. That is why I keep going. 50 episodes, 1 year. The beginning of April was 1 year. And what's really cool is I started podcasting in 2021, April of 2021. I just April's a special time when it comes to podcasting and all the things. Downloads, nearly 20,000 downloads, like I said at the very beginning, almost 60,000 views. And YouTube is a whole other animal. I just kind of put stuff on there and let's see what happens. And here is what I want to say about those numbers. Every single one of them is a woman or a husband or a couple who needed this conversation and couldn't find it anywhere else. And that means so much to me. And not as a wow, you're really doing the thing. It really is this confirmation of the Lord has me where I'm supposed to be and I'm doing the thing that He wants me to do. That is not a small thing. That is absolutely everything. This show exists because you needed it and you showed up, and I'm so grateful for every single one of you. I cannot say that enough. Man, I'm going to get a little overwhelmed. So before I tell you what I have to announce, I want to talk about her for a minute. Well, really you, or really me, a few years ago. Because every episode we make, this one included, is for a specific woman. And I want to make sure she knows she's seen. You likely are like me and you grew up in the church. You love God. You followed the rules, you waited, the purity pledge, all of it. Maybe you didn't do the pledge, but you know the purity culture. Maybe you had the ring and you had all the things. She believed, like genuinely believed, that if she honored God before marriage, he would take care of everything after. And while I don't disagree with the message or the baseline of that, honor God, the Lord will bless, right? That's true. That's what scripture tells us. But you got married. It was good for a while. And then life came, kids came, the years came. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, you realized that you and your husband had drifted into a version of your marriage that you didn't plan. I look at my daughter and son-in-law who are still just in their first year of marriage, and I don't know what the Lord has for them. And we were talking a little bit about this. I don't know. Like, marriage might not be a struggle for them, but there are other bumps along the way. And we don't know. When we stood at the altar and we said, for better or worse, till death do us part, in richer and poorer, in sickness and health, and all of those things. Honestly, I only thought of the positives, in richer health and better. I didn't really think of those like actual negative things. You love your husband. You are committed to your marriage, but there's a distance that you just don't have words for. A part of your marriage that might have recently, might have for a long time, might have always felt harder than you thought it would be. Maybe there's a quiet shame that you have carried around for a long time, and you're not sure what, you can't even remember what it was like before. You never talked about it because who would you tell? You followed the rules. It was supposed to be fine. It was supposed to be great, and you're not fine. But friend, here's what I have to tell you. You are not alone. The woman who this show is for, who this podcast is for, that woman who has showed up 50 times and listened to every single one of these episodes and shared this, and you're part of that 20,000 downloads. That woman is who I have been writing for, who I have been posting for, who I have been talking for. You did the right things and still you ended up here. This show is for you. And so is what comes next. So I've told you about the book, right? I've been working on this book, well, really for a very long time, but it wasn't until a few months ago, a friend of mine, we sat down and we were doing Bible study together. And you know how when you're talking to somebody and you can tell that they just are not ready to leave? And I was like, hey, come sit down, let's chat. And she happened to run across some of my TikTok videos. I use this one video thing. It automatically disseminates to TikTok and YouTube and does all the shorts and the reels and the whatevers. And she's like, I happen to see some of your TikTok reels. And she's like, would you ever talk? And she mentioned a place. I was like, I will talk anywhere about this. And she's like, have you thought about writing a book? And I laughed. And then I said, you know what? Actually, I've learned that if this is what the Lord wants, then he's going to make it abundantly clear for me. And so I'm not saying I won't ever, I just don't know what that would look like. And I sat down that day, and if you are not a fan of AI or ChatGPT or any of those things, friend, I just would encourage you to look at it because if you're my age, encyclopedias, resources, Google, that's all it is. But I sat down with Chat. I call her Charlie because I just think she's a cool chick. And I kind of word vomited all of this stuff. And within a matter of moments, I had this outline for the book. And what seemed like this ethereal, random idea became very concrete. And I started writing and writing and writing and writing and writing. And now there's a book. And it will be released in the fall. That's the plan. I mean, who knows? Maybe the Lord has other plans, but that's my plan for right now. So I wrote, and it has been incredibly cathartic. There's one chapter in particular, chapter 5, gets me every single time I write it. That is it is like the pivot, the arc of whatever. I'm not an English major, the arc, that's it. That's the climax. And that's where we make the turn. And every single time I read it, I'm just in awe of what God has done in my heart and in my marriage and in my life and in my understanding. And I'm on a mission to share that with you. And in fact, if you've been following along for a while, I've been in this, I don't know what to post on social media. And I feel like I'm finally getting my groove because I want you to know that you're not alone. And I want to share those things. Anyways, I wrote, and I'm here to tell you what the title of the book is. So I'm so glad that you guys picked the title that I wanted. I was going to go with it probably anyways, but for those of you who voted, this has been the title. Really, it's been the working title since the beginning, and it's Good Girls, Bad Theology. And I feel like that is exactly who we are, who you are, who I am. We were good girls. I was a good girl. I followed the rules. I am very careful not to say you followed every rule, you did everything right, you did, because hello, we're not perfect. But when it comes to sex and intimacy and purity culture, like God, we understood the assignment and we did it. And we followed that. I did what I was told. I showed up. And it wasn't for me just a checkbox. It definitely was. I wanted to honor the Lord. And what I was told, some of it was right and some not. The part that wasn't right moved into my marriage and did damage. And I didn't even understand it literally until 2023. I did not understand it until 2023. So if you've been following along, 2014 was a very pivotal point in my marriage. My husband and I was sitting there Googling, what does it cost to get a divorce? And the Lord took something that I felt was so irrevocably broken, and made Ah, he did a wonder. He did a miracle. He did something marvelous in our marriage. And yet I held on to a piece for a very long time. Even when we met with a marriage counselor and he encouraged me to really look into the walls that I was putting up, I felt very justified. I felt very justified to put those walls up. But 2023, I listened to a podcast and all of a sudden I realized, Michelle, you are arrogant and prideful and you need to be knocked down. And the Lord did just that. That's what this book is about. Not throwing out your faith, not abandoning the biblical framework for marriage and sexuality. I'm more committed to that than ever. But it is about identifying the specific lies that got layered on top of that framework. The ones that were never in scripture. The ones that followed good Christian girls into Christian marriages and quietly broke things that were never supposed to break. And here is what I want you to know about why I wrote it. I wrote it for her. I wrote it for you. I wrote it for the Michelle in 1997 who got married and didn't understand what was ahead of her. I wrote it for the Michelle in 2003 who was now a new mom and was struggling with things that she didn't even know how to voice in her marriage. I wrote it for the woman in 2014 who felt very justified that her husband made choices and did things that made her feel like she was better than. I wrote it for the woman in 2023 whose eyes would finally be opened to recognize that God has so much more in plan. He has so much more in store for my marriage, and my pride needs to go to the back. It needs to be confessed and it needs to be obliterated. I wrote it for the woman who did the right things, who took the purity pledge, who stayed pure until marriage, who isn't sitting here saying, I blame the church, I blame my parents. That's not my standpoint. That's not what I do. Okay. The church got some things wrong. Your parents probably got some things wrong because guess what? They're not perfect. But now it's time to take ownership. It's time to take responsibility and step up and make those changes. So I wrote it for you right now. You who is listening to this right now, I wrote it for you, for the woman who has been listening to this podcast and nodding along and finally feels like she has language for something that she's been carrying alone for a long time. And what I'm finding and realizing is for a lot of us, it's finally coming to the forefront and we're realizing this in our 40s. And I'm wondering if it has something to do with more than likely your kids are a little bit older and now you can't hide behind them. That was me. My kids were a great shield. Good Girls, Bad Theology comes out this fall, and I wrote it because I needed it. And I am pretty sure you do too. So, okay, what comes next? Here's where we are. 50 episodes, a book coming this fall, and a woman, maybe you, who is somewhere in the middle of her own story. Maybe you're just starting to name what has been wrong. Like it's been in there and you just can't figure it out. And really what you've been spending a lot of time is pointing the finger. He's done this, he's done this, he's done this. Go look at my Instagram posts, friends, recently. I'm telling you, instead of praying to change him, ask the Lord to start with your heart. It's not saying that he's perfect. That's not what we're saying at all. But you got to start with yourself first. Maybe you're years into the work of unlearning and rebuilding. Maybe you're somewhere in between. Wherever you are, this show is not slowing down. We have so much more to cover. I have so many thoughts, ideas, so many things I want to do to reach you. The conversations we have not had yet, the questions that keep coming into my DMs, the topics that nobody in the Christian space is willing to touch, or very few. It's a small circle, small circle. We are going to keep going. And the book is going to go deeper into everything this show has been building towards. Honestly, the book is the podcast in written form. Here's what I want you to do right now. Two things. One, if this show has given you something, if any episode has landed in a way that changed something for you, would you share it today? Whether it's episode 50, do this one, episode number 1, somewhere in between, share it. Send it to one friend, one woman you know who needs this conversation. She might not know she needs it at all, but she does. Be the one who hands it to her. And number 2, I want you to be the first to know when the book drops. Get on the list. The link is in the show notes and in my bio. It's the basic one that puts you on my newsletter, email list, all the things. I promise you are not going to get a million emails. Go take the quiz. That's a great way to get started to just to get an idea of and maybe some language as to where you're at right now. I'll be sharing updates there. I'm going to cover reveals, launch details, all of it. You have been here for the podcast and I want you here for the book too. The podcast was the beginning of the conversation. The book is where we go deeper, and you, friend, are invited. I have so many thoughts and ideas. And what I have found is that this audience here, this is a tender, emotional topic. And it's hard. It's hard to be vulnerable and, share it with a friend, because then there's that identification of like, oh my gosh, is she gonna know that I struggled with this too? Yeah, because she probably does too. I'm not into husband bashing. Like, we don't do that, but I want to encourage you that you are not the only one, and you can talk about these things and find other women where you can share this information. And the more vulnerable you're willing to be, I promise you, somebody else is out there. That woman who emailed me and said that for the first time she had that conversation with friends about sex, and she had to get vulnerable. And I'm guessing it just emboldened her to be brave, like encouraged her to be brave. I want to share this with you. I read this morning. It's Psalm 113. Praise the Lord. Praise, O servants of the Lord. Praise the name of the Lord. Blessed be the name of the Lord from this time forth and forevermore, from the rising of the sun to its setting. The name of the Lord be praised. And then the Lord is high above all nations, and his glory above the heavens. Who is like the Lord our God, who is seated on high? And it goes on and on and on. Friend, our God, that is our God. He cares about everything that happens in this world that he created, even the intimacy and the sex in your marriage. Thank you so much for being here. This is episode 50, and I don't know what else the Lord has in store, but I got some ideas. I got some thoughts. And if you have some ideas, would you share with me? How can I serve you? I cannot believe that we are here. I am so incredibly grateful. This is not a polished, scripted place. I come to you with authenticity and vulnerability. This show has cost me something and given me back more than I can explain. And it's because of you, because you showed up, because you kept listening, because you sent the DMs and the emails and wrote the reviews and did all the things. 50 episodes, 1 year, nearly 20,000 downloads, and a book on the way. We are just getting started. And the best part, you're already here. I love you, friend, and I will see you next week. If this conversation stirred something in you and you want to go deeper, head over to itsme.michellecastro.com. There, you'll find resources, studies, and tools to help you continue rebuilding intimacy in your marriage. And remember, you're not the only one navigating this. If this episode encouraged you, share it with a friend and start the conversation. Until next time, keep seeking truth, keep choosing courage, and keep rebuilding intimacy.